Love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
Hi, I'm Dave Barnes.
And I'm John McLaughlin.
And welcome to Dadville.
Dadville's a podcast where we talk about life, love, and the pursuit of awesome dadding.
It's funny thoughts and deep talks.
So please, enjoy your time here in Dadville and enjoy this episode with...
Andy Crouch. We are talking about the genius of Scott Joplin's The Entertainer.
Oh, yes, indeed.
You walked right into that.
Did you? What's your relationship with stride piano like? I know you studied classical
My
stuff.
relationship with stride? I've played that piece years ago. Mm-hmm. I could not sit down and do it right now. That's for sure. I dabbled in that world. Oh, there's some recent artist who does incredible ragtime piano. I was really into him a couple years ago. I cannot remember his name right now, but there's some interesting, like, contemporary reinterpretations of that
I love
style.
I love it.
Well, I think we got everything we need. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah,
that was
thank
great.
you so much.
Okay.
Merry Christmas.
Cheers. Peace out.
And you just heard Andy Crouch's honest take on stride piano. Thanks so much for being with us today, by the way.
It is a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
We are thrilled
fun
to have you. I was telling John, of all the Dadville guests we've had, you may be the most center of the Venn diagram guests that we've had.
Really?
Like, as far as really, it's not, because I think we've had ones that get closer, have held that before, but they didn't have the music part. And so now it just really dials it into
all the
it is
boxes.
everything right square in the middle.
Which is kind of funny because, I mean, I have no idea how you feel about where it falls in your Venn diagram of who Andy Crouch is, but it's almost like, and also, on top of it, he also is a classically trained pianist. Let's just throw that on the pile of accomplishments.
Yeah.
Well,
Which is particularly threatening to someone who is just clinging to that one thing.
Well, you should hear me right now desperately trying to do these triplet, basically, scales that are in Beethoven's second piano sonata, meant to be played in the first movement. Uh-huh. Like, they're the simplest possible thing, but I cannot get it up to tempo. I just cannot do it. So don't be too intimidated, because my technique is rusty, I tell you.
Well, listen, this is the last thing I'll say. It's funny because Dave and I, just minutes ago, when we were prepping, we were like, you know what, let's not really spend much time on music at all. And then here we are. But the other day I was starting to learn. I don't play much Bach. Listeners, please stay with us. This is going to be so.
We're gonna. This really it comes around again at the end. You'll see it's beautiful.
I love Bach, but I never.
You can say we get Bach to it.
There we go. I never wanted to play it. It's just like anyway. I started some new Bach. I have this Bach book that I have had for years. I've never cracked it open. And I was like, I need to force myself to learn something new. It's been a few months.
Yeah.
And me sitting there trying to do this Bach, like 3-part invention thing.
Oh, yes.
You would think that I have just seen a piano 5 minutes before for the first time. I kid you not. I've been playing piano for, 38 years. And I was thinking I should take a video of this and post this
just
online.
Encourage people
and be like, I'm not joking. I'm really trying to play this piece right now.
Oh, trying to wrap Bach, of all the classical composers, he never goes where you expect him to go. Like, never ever.
Yeah.
And yes, the independence of those lines in the 3-part inventions, and then I did spend like 10 years working my way through the first book of the Well-Tempered Clavier, which is, the Preludes and Fugues. Mm-hmm. And it's just, Yeah, no, my brain does not work the way Bach's brain did. That's for sure. And it's humbling. It's humbling.
I mean, it's
Good for
beautiful,
you, though,
but
John.
it's
That's
like
awesome.
it's like the calculus of music.
Yes, it is. It is completely.
You know?
And the more elaborate stuff, honestly, I don't know how a listener is supposed to even orient themselves to it in a way. Like I do think he was partly doing like some of the fugues. I think he was just doing for the mathematical joy of it.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
he could improvise. It is basically improvised. Like he could just sort of work
It's
it out as he
insane.
went, which is
It's
insane.
Meanwhile, cut to Dave, and I'm like, I finally worked out that.
Hey,
That was actually based off of a Bach fugue.
Don't do. I will believe you.
Don't
if you
look
really
that up.
lean into that
Don't
hard
look
enough.
that up.
I was going to say, if you lean in, I'm going to be like, no way. Nuno Betancourt at his height of powers. Okay, now that thank you for the 3 people that are still listening.
Yeah.
We're so
Mom,
excited for the
I love
piano
you.
enthusiasts. Yeah, Mom, I love you too. And maybe Andy's wife is thinking about not listening anymore at this point. So we have Andy with us. So Andy, we call this the brag sheet. I'm going to read your list of accomplishments here, which is substantial, by the way.
Make it quick.
Partner for Theology and Culture at Praxis, author of 5 books: The Life We're Looking For, Reclaiming Relationship in a Technological World, The Tech-Wise Family, Everyday Steps for Putting Technology in its Proper Place, Strong and Weak, Embracing a Life of Love, Risk, and True Flourishing, Playing God, Redeeming the Gift of Power, and Culture Making, Recovering Our Creative Calling. Serves on the governing board of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. Serves as editor at Christianity Today. As editor at Christianity Today. In 2017, he was a senior strategist for the John Templeton Foundation. Has been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Time. I would say maybe the most important thing was shouted out by Lecrae on his song Nonfiction. Props. From 98 to 2003, he was the editor-in-chief of Regeneration Quarterly. Received an MDiv summa cum laude from Boston University of Theology, and I'm so bad at that I wanted to make sure that I even said that right, much less got the degree to prove it. And then father of 2 kids. So one thing, we've sort of cheated, Andy, because you and I got to hang a little bit last week, so I sort of feel like I know probably a little more than the normal host does. But something that we talked about in our conversation that I kind of wanted to start our 6-hour interview with is I hope I texted you that was just you
And
said
the clock's starting now, just so you know. All of that lead up was not official.
We actually determine what counts and doesn't, so it tends to go a little longer than what we say.
6 good hours.
Yeah, 6 good
It's
hours.
like
Thank you.
we've been married for 15 wonderful years, and the other 22 years were not that bad either. Yeah.
I'm gonna start referring to that.
That is good.
too.
I don't think I've heard that.
So you said this as we were talking. I've thought about this so much. Is that you really haven't had a career, right? Like you had all of these jobs,
Yes,
which I think
yes.
is such a great way to think about it. Because you have, as I read your sort of brag sheet up here, you've done so many things. I was curious, what is the motive behind that? Was it something that you kept following, sort of open doors, or did you sort of always have an intent to move?
Oh, that's a great question. I have not had an intent to like chart a path in that sense. I would say every big move has definitely been intentional. But there were kind of 3 acts where there were these kind of decisive moments where I realized a part of my life, in my work life, was coming to a close, and that something new was opening up. So the first big one, I spent my first 10 years. I'm shocked, Dave, that you cut this from the bio, but I spent my first 10 years out of college in campus ministry. That is working alongside college students at this group called the Harvard Radcliffe Christian Fellowship.
Yeah.
So 10 years of that, which while I was in the midst of them, I never wanted it to end, and did a fair amount on music professionally during that time as well. Loved it. And yet at the end of 10 years, realized I was kind of needing to move into journalism for my own kind of, to follow an emerging call, I guess. So I started writing a lot more. I ended up editing the magazine that you mentioned, then editing a bigger magazine that actually was more successful than the first magazine. But then, that was 15 plus years. And towards the end of that time, realized I think this era in my life of journalism is coming to a close. So there have been moments where you realize this is a season that's ending. What's the next thing? And thankfully, though it's never been clear far in advance, at the moment when I realized I've got to leave, because I sometimes you just do feel like the work that I can do is done. There's always been a right next thing, and I would almost say like an amazingly right next thing as it's turned out. Did you feel? I'm curious in those moments. Did you feel like you needed permission to do that? Did you have like people in your life that was sort of speaking into those decisions, or was there enough clarity there that you were kind of like, no, this is exactly what I need to do? I always felt like I needed counsel. I don't know that I would say I looked for permission. I don't think I would have done the things that I've done if I were asking for permission. Not that they've been terribly transgressive, but I've just not done things that normally you go somewhere for a vote on. And I've sort of followed my instinct about what matters most to me, to be totally honest, but in consultation with friends who know me well enough to really be able to honestly say, that's right or that's not right. So does that make sense? So definitely ask for advice, definitely ask for prayer, but not like having to clear it with anybody.
Do you feel like that variety in your career, quote unquote, or the jobs that you've had has sort of forced you out of that snare that so many people, but maybe especially men, fall into, where your career is your career is your identity? Maybe something that Dave and I'll just speak for myself, like being a musician. Dave, you don't struggle with this. Being a musician, it's like, this is what you do because this is who you are, and you have to create and you have to write. And if you ever stop doing this, it's because you failed at it or whatever. Do you feel like you have sort of avoided that?
I know exactly what you're talking about. And no, I have not at all escaped that snare, because, that is the hard thing about not, like, I just came from a meeting with the superintendent of the schools of our local public school district here. They've, to their great credit, they're thinking about their policy about phones in schools, and he invited me to meet with him. So this guy's actually an interim superintendent. Okay, so he's been a superintendent of like 5 different school districts in his career. And he knows perfectly well in all those jobs, especially as an interim, he's filling an office, right? There's like an office that he moved into that he's going to move out of. And I actually thought I'm in the presence of someone who, and I have every reason to appreciate and admire this guy, but who has lived such a different life from me, because everywhere I go, I have to carry my own credibility with me, whereas he gets to just he's superintendent of schools. Like, as long as he has that job, he's got the authority, he's got the power, right? And then he knows he will walk away from it, that school boards get disenchanted or whatever, or in an interim job, someone permanent gets hired. But for me, this has been a huge struggle, because, what am I worth if it's not me? Like, I don't have an office. I don't have a title or an organization, to wield. So, I identify with that very much. I think the thing that has been most helpful for me in freeing myself of that identity trap is actually something else I've done, which is every 7 years for quite a while now, I have taken a sabbatical for the better part of a year, and I just plan to quit my job every 7 years. So the next one is on the calendar for 2030, because I just did it in 2023. And everyone at Praxis, where I work now, knows that in January of 2030, I will go off the payroll. If they want me back after 6 to 9 months, we'll figure out the exact timing closer to the time. But if they want me back, great. That's what happened this last time. I left. I came back 7 months later, and I still had a job. But if not, that's okay too. And so, every 7 years, I completely stop what I'm doing and make room for other things and things that frankly don't provide for my family. So we save up money. Like for 6 years, we're saving.
Yeah.
So the 7th year we can cover our expenses, or my share of our expenses, because my wife does work. And that's been more helpful, because those Sabbath times are long enough that people do kind of forget about you, and you forget about the people you thought you wanted to remember you. And
So how many times have you done that?
I guess 5 maybe. So the first time was actually in the middle of college. I took a year off, now there are these things called gap years and that kind of stuff. This was 1987. It was a long time ago. So it was very unusual. I went to this prestigious school. I remember sitting down with the dean of students. He was like, "No one does this, and I don't think you should be doing it, but I'll give you permission to do it if you want." He was very negative about it. I think today colleges would be like, "This is great. You'll come back way more mature like in a year than you are now," which is what happened. So I took that year. I had a year where the magazine I was editing failed. Then I started getting to realizing, this is actually a healthy rhythm. Like, some of the most important things in my life came out of that year off from college. Incredibly important things happened in that year after the magazine failed and I lost that job. I guess I've done it 5 times with different levels of intentionality or planning. But now it's intentional.
That is fascinating.
That is so fascinating. So what is there sort of a general practice you've had in those times?
Yeah, that's emerged. I mean, honestly, I was just kind of figuring it out, or, in the case of that year after I lost the job, I was just like adrift almost, though it was really fruitful adrift in the long run. Now what I recommend, and we actually really encourage, so I work with entrepreneurs now in my day job, and we encourage them to put that 7-year mark on the calendar, and often they're 1 or 2 years into their company. I encourage a pattern, which is what I backed into without knowing it was a pattern, of first just deep rest. So if I have 6 months, I'll take the first 2 months with literally nothing on the calendar. I turn off all my email. I keep my personal account. I check it once a week or something, but I certainly all the work stuff just gets shunted into an archive. I never see it. So a couple months where I can sleep as late as I want. I can get up and, I don't know, what do you want to do on a day off? Okay, you have 60 of those in a row. So I start practicing with the piano way more. I read books that I don't have time to read. I read kinds of books I don't normally read, right? So deep rest, then pilgrimage has ended up being really important. So travel that is not tourism. So tourism is traveling somewhere to be treated better than you're treated at home. It's essentially to have an experience of being like royalty almost. Oh, I loved that resort. The breakfast in bed was so great. That's not what pilgrimage is. Pilgrimage is travel, but with the intent often of it being fairly difficult. Like some people actually take walking pilgrimages. I haven't done that, but the Camino de Santiago is the best known one. But potentially a difficult journey, not necessarily to a nice place, quote unquote, but a place where you believe, and this is me as a Christian, how I would frame this, that God's at work in a place that he's not evidently at work right around where I am. So with different kinds of people. So often I try to get out of the developed world, get into places where people live with a lot more material poverty sometimes, but also a lot more cultural richness than I think we sometimes have in my part of the world. Anyway, so I take these trips and just try to pay attention to what's happening in me and around me and what God might be saying to me in those. And then the third phase is creative discernment, which is starting to re-engage with the question, what am I meant to do next? So I will start to think about I won't usually start the next work, but I'll start thinking about the next work and talk with some people. So deep rest, pilgrimage, creative discernment, roughly equal thirds is the usual pattern.
Dave.
Yes.
Hey, can you hear this?
Sorry, what's that?
You hear that?
Let me open the window. Oh, there you are. Hey, what's up?
The listener can't hear this, but I'm running my fingers through my hair.
Oh.
You hear that now?
Sound is?
Yeah.
It sounds like a symphony. It sounds
Exactly.
like a cat purring. It sounds like wind through beautiful aspens in Colorado.
All those things are right, Dave, because this year,
What?
there's nothing holding you back from loving your hair again. Hair, as I've said for years, is so much more than what you see on the surface.
Yes.
It's a reflection of what's happening inside, okay?
Yep.
So let Nutrafol, that's right, target the root causes of your thinning hair and help you grow stronger, healthier strands from within.
Physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients.
Get those drugs out of
Nutrafol
here.
supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning: stress, hormones, aging, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health.
That's right, Dave. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement with over 1 million people seeing thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair with less shedding.
Building a hair growth routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription required. Automated deliveries and free shipping keep you on track. Plus, with a Nutrafol subscription, you can save up to 20%. That's 5 more than
Amazing.
15. You'll have access to free naturopathic doctor consults. What? And a Headspace meditation membership. All there.
Included. Start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code DADVILLE.
Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code DADVILLE.
That's Nutrafol.com, promo code DADVILLE.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. After watching this season of the HBO's original series, The White Lotus, this is the tropical getaway I needed. One more pina colada, please.
Hey, you're not on mute.
Oh, I thought I was in paradise. Turns out it was my Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate pina colada and Thai iced coffee flavored creamers. Inspired by the newest season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus. For the love of coffee. Try now.
There are a few things that I'm constantly more fascinated by and inspired by than intention, like people with real intention. And I think when we were talking about that last week, just the different jobs you've had, I was wondering, especially in light of this podcast with people who are listening, and if I could be so bold, especially men, just because I'm a man, I'm curious when you think about that and what inspires me with you having different jobs, is it so counter-cultural? It's this idea that, one, you go to college to study for the thing you're going to do for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
And so I just wonder for people that are listening, and I would say maybe especially men that are listening who are, working and maybe in jobs that they're just kind of like, it's not what I love to do, but it pays the bills, and
Right.
I can kind of graph my life and how we spend our money according to what I make doing this thing. Like, is there a word for that? I mean, do you have a word for those people who, is it something where, you could look at your life because you are so good at so many things. God's made you this really interesting combination of a lot of skill sets that those people could say, well, I mean, look at him. He's got all these things he's good at. I'm sort of good at this one thing. Or is it something that you feel like we have sort of drifted into maybe in the American culture where it's kind of like you just have a job and you keep doing it? And are we missing something by doing that,
Well, I'm hesitating a little bit because, for most of history, first of all, if you were a guy, you did what your father did. If your father was a miller, you were a miller, and eventually your family name was Miller.
Right.
And you did it your whole life.
Which makes me wonder about what your family did.
the
Was it
Crouches.
hunting? Was it sort of like a hiding? Were you in trouble? Was there
Was pouncing involved?
surprise parties? Maybe there was a huge industry for that.
Oh my gosh. For the record, it comes from an Old English word that means cross. It's related to cross. It's
there
probably
it
a family that lived at the crossroads, that lived at an intersection.
yeah.
But since you ask, yeah, so, I mean, the flexibility we have in our modern world, like, it's a great gift. It's also a great burden, frankly, for all of us. Like, that none of us, no matter how routine your job is, know that you'll have it, 10 years from now. And, that idea of you go to college to study the thing, I mean, that might have been true for maybe my even my own dad, I suppose, but not true for anyone younger than me. Just empirically speaking, it's not happening anymore.
Yeah, the data, yeah.
But I don't, I actually think there's something very admirable about people. There's a guy repairing our front walkway doing masonry this week. Happily, they're done for the day, or else we'd have jackhammers in the background of this podcast. I was worried a little bit earlier today. He's probably in his 60s. He's got a bunch of young men working with him. They work at an incredible level of craft that you can only attain. He's done so many, like you walk around our particular neighborhood in southeastern Pennsylvania, just, piece after piece of masonry, like his firm has done, and they always do it really well. And the accumulated like knowledge, I think that's tremendously admirable, frankly. Mm-hmm. I will say, so think about like the person who was a miller their whole life. For them, the transitions would have been much more it would have been actually family oriented. So you went from being a young man to being a father, then a grandfather, often along the way, an uncle. And I do think if you don't have significant seasons that you can mark out in your life story that are like the steep part of the curve of spiritual growth, like I don't think growth happens in linear fashion for us, but there are these growth spurts, right, that happen for kids. But at least for me, there have been some of them related to my career, some of them to other things where I've been like, oh, this new part of my life requires a whole new set of capacities that I don't have yet. And I don't think that has to be in your paid job. For some people it will be. It has definitely been for me. But I think if you aren't like seeking out the next like big climb, you are probably missing out. But that next big climb may or may not be a change of job or a change of vocation or profession. That just depends so much on circumstances.
Well, what would you say are, if you distilled down, like you have this every 7-year sabbatical kind of method that you're doing, which I'm sure to a lot of our listeners, as we're acknowledging, seems quite a feat.
It's wild. Yeah, it's unusual.
Yeah. What would you say are like the elements of it that you're getting out of it? You know what I mean? Is it rest must be one of them? Is it uncomfortability? What would you say are the elements that you're getting out of it, that maybe someone could take those and find their own version?
Find their own way. I mean, what I think Sabbath is for, and sabbatical is just the every 7-year version of what I do think should happen every 7 days for all of us, is detachment from providing for myself. Detachment from providing financially. Back in the days when almost everyone was agricultural, like you just leave the field for a day and you trust that it's going to produce what you need for your family, right? But in our modern wage economy, it's I don't do anything that produces income, right? 1 day a week, but also 1 week, 1 year and 7. But then not just wage, but also significance and status. So what are the things that when I do them, I get recognition, I can tell people what my job is. Like, it is odd during this sabbatical, what do you do? At the moment, nothing, actually.
Yeah, right.
I'm resting. Does that count? Well, wait, how long? Several months. I mean, it's very strange, right? Yeah. And it is, and not least as a man, it's very destabilizing, right? To not be able to answer that question, what do you do? It's also incredibly healthy to realize my identity does not, in fact, rest, has never truly rested in what I do or any of that. So it's that detachment. But then on the other side of that detachment is this amazing discovery, and this is the pattern of Sabbath even at the weekly level, that all of this was always a gift anyway. It's not about something I'm earning or accomplishing in the first place. Anything I can say I earn or accomplish, I'm doing with the tailwind of grace and gift in my life. And Sabbath is this practice, and I think the every 7-year one just amps it up to a much clearer level maybe than once a week. Because it's almost like you can hold your breath for one day a week and you can put off the email for one day a week. But when you turn off the email and the social media and all that stuff for months at a time, like you completely exhale and you breathe in something different and new. And it's my life is a gift and my identity is secure no matter what. I mean, those are the biggest things. And then I would say insight, right, would be the other thing I am trying to make enough space that the noise dies down enough. Frankly, first the external noise dies down, and then the internal noise increases. The anxiety, the fantasy. I basically think of my thought life most of the time is either anxiety or fantasy. It's good things I wish would happen in the future that actually wouldn't be good for me, or bad things I wish that will happen in the future, or don't want to have happen in the future. Right? Yeah. I should be living with hope and proper fear, but instead I live with fantasy and anxiety. So those things actually surface when you get quiet one way or another, and that's very humbling. And so then you work through that and in a sense let those things go, repent of those things, and then what comes mysteriously and unbiddably and unpredictably, but in my experience fairly reliably, is you actually start to discern, there's like this path in this, meadow that looked like it didn't have a path, but actually, look, there's this little way I can go that's going to lead me somewhere. And at the end of that is going to be the next big growth curve for me. That's what I'm looking for. To be transparent, I went into this last sabbatical in a very tough time. My father just died. My mother was in great need of care and a transition in her own life out of the home they'd lived in for 30 years. So the first third of my sabbatical, which was supposed to be deep rest, was actually, one was marrying off my son, which is its own kind of amazing transition, which was very joyful. But literally in the same week that Timothy got married, we moved my mom out of this home of 30 years into an assisted living facility she did not want to go to, but must because of her cognitive limitations at this stage of her life. And I was so destabilized by all that, and probably other reasons, and maybe unhealthy in some ways that I maybe haven't fully reckoned with, that I came to the end of this last sabbatical with less of that insight than any of the previous ones, to be totally honest. I think every previous one I've known what the next book was. And this one I came out with a book idea that I've then spent the next 6 months trying to write and completely decided it's the wrong idea and I have to start over. Wow. So this is not magic, or it's not mechanism, but it is a way of depending on someone other than myself for it.
Well, I'm sure even that rhythm that you're describing of like the noise outside's going down, now the noise inside increases, then it goes down, and then there's rest, and then there's clarity. After doing it 3-4 times, that in and of it, that cycle every 7 years can become sort of a well-worn path that you then depend on.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, completely. And it's interesting how much it's part of, I'm 6 years away from the next one, and yet it's in my consciousness.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that's the other thing I should have said when you asked, what are the outcomes? I want to say there's this incredible liberation from self-pity when you know you have deep rest coming. So
wow, what
this
a thought.
is true even on a weekly basis, because my family, when I married Catherine, it turned out both of us in college had decided to keep the Sabbath, which frankly at the colleges we went to was not something people ever thought about. Right. People were grinding it out the whole time. But each of us had independently been doing this, so we got married. Of course, we kept doing it. And I tell you, when you're on Wednesday and you're working really hard and you're overwhelmed, the temptation to self-pity is very real. And what you do in response to self-pity is all kind of indulging of, frankly, fantasy and sometimes anxiety that is very bad for your health short and long term. Mm-hmm. And when you know there is a day coming, and it's not that far away, it's never more than 4 days away, when I will be feasting, I'll be napping, I'll be outdoors, whatever gives you joy, that is not it's on the calendar, right?
Yeah.
It just makes it harder to feel sorry for yourself in the midst of the hard day. And I would say having that year, because work can sometimes be very hard. Even I've had jobs I've mostly loved, but it's still work. But I know, like, within a few years, I'm going to be going somewhere. It won't necessarily be, as I say, it's not like I'm going to go to Disney or something, but I'm going to go somewhere where I'm going to experience something amazing of God and amazing of the world, and where I have permission to do that, and I have the freedom to do that. That is incredibly, liberating from feeling sorry for myself in whatever I have to get done today.
Yeah. Do you guys ever try to like out Sabbath each other?
Well, what we do is we swap. Like there are daily tasks of daily living, that to some extent have to happen. So we take on each other. So most days during the week, Catherine cooks and I do the dishes. But usually on Sunday, I cook, which I enjoy doing one day. I would do it more, but for various reasons. It's not my daily work, as it were. Mm-hmm. But then Catherine does the dishes. So, competition for how restful can you be?
I'm just saying next Sabbath, just keep that in mind and just keep score.
You're like, what was your sleep score this afternoon? Wow, 3 hours. Well done. REM sleep. You hit REM.
Compare Apple Watch scores.
Yeah.
So you have 2 kids, right?
We have 2. They are kids. They're still our kids, but they're 27, 24, Timothy and Amy. And we kind of have 3 because Sophia married Timothy, and it feels like we got a daughter for free. It's the most amazing thing.
So Dave and I, our kids, Dave has 3, I have 2, and they stair step in ages, so Ben is 13, and then Sammy's 8, and then my girls are 9, 11, in there. So we are in like the throes.
The middle of it.
Which, I say that, but I'm sure anyone listening who is a parent is probably like, no, my version.
It's all the throes. It's all the throes.
I would have said that 5 years ago,
Andy's still in the throes in his own way.
Right. You might be surprised. Yeah, you will be surprised.
But I'm looking at, this is the fantasy that I'm picturing right now. I mean, I look at people like you who, like, your kids are grown, they're in their 20s, they're out, they're doing well. I'm just like, right now in my life, nothing, I don't like desire a guarantee in any other area of life more than I guarantee, more than I would like a guarantee for that. If I just knew my girls would be okay. Because we are in, one of them's in middle school, one's still in elementary school. We're just in the mix of like social stuff, and kids are being mean, but they're super busy right now, and so
self-tattooing in the bathroom.
But that's actually okay. That's I've got some tattoos too.
Touché.
So,
Touché.
but I'm curious, like in the stage that I'm in right now, just speaking for me, I feel on a daily basis whether this is good or bad, I feel the pressure to parent correctly. You know what I mean? I feel the pressure to
yes.
Because, and probably I think part of it is because they are so busy now and they're doing great stuff and it's all great. But we're not spending 12 hours a day together anymore.
No, that's right.
So I've they get home at 4, and then the practice is at 5. So we've got that hour, 45 minutes or whatever together. So I'm curious, when you look back at the time that Dave and I are in right now, do you feel like you and your wife, quote unquote, parented your kids? Is it like a series of issues that you parented them through, or do you feel like you guys just lived your life in a upstanding, exemplary way, and were just kind of there, and just prayed for your kids every day, and it just happened?
Oh my gosh. Well, oh man, I have so much to say about this. I mean, the first is we felt everything you're feeling, including the sense of uncertainty, and we're not sure this is going well. We're not sure this is going to end well. Mm-hmm. I would say, especially with our daughter, our kids have very different personalities. But Amy, there were two, and she would say this and has said this publicly, so it's nothing she wouldn't describe about her own life. There were 2 to 3 years in early high school, basically. They're just, I don't know. I mean, I've had tough things happen, but I would say watching my incredibly confident, totally secure daughter disappear at age 12 and be replaced by this anxious, withdrawn, young woman who would come home from school and go upstairs and shut the door to our room. And we're like, we have no idea what has happened today. We have no idea what's happening in her room. We don't think it's particularly good. We don't know what's happening in her heart or in her mind. And she couldn't express it. And I mean, I remember just thinking, and it was even harder on my wife. She was always kind to me and responsive to me, but for whatever reason, she was not either of those things to Catherine. And my poor wife to have to just day after day, and I travel 100 days a year. So, a third of the time Catherine is managing this all on her own. And it was a very tough time. And we had other similar moments of just great perplexity with our son. And so anyway, that's the main thing I want you to know is, well, first of all, there is truly no guarantee because we have friends who are way more exemplary than we are. I would have no hesitation in saying, if you could pick parents, pick these other friends. And frankly, the greatest heartbreak of their lives is their adult children, and with ongoing stories in every case, and the story's not all finished ever in a way, I believe, and certainly not written. But so there are no guarantees, and you just feel it, and so that's the first thing.
I want to say,
sounds hopeful. Keep going.
No, that's what I was going to say. It actually is.
I hope
it's just
it should
encouraging.
be hopeful. Actually,
it's really encouraging, and a lot of the things that you're describing are falling right in line to my day-to-day life right now.
Sure. And so the next thing I would say is, I actually think the more you try to tackle specific issues, the less likely it is to work. I'm not saying it won't ever work, but when you're like, okay, kids, our project this week is self-esteem or technology use or, basketball tryouts, how are we going to do on that? I think the biggest thing that's changed in adolescence between my generation, let's say, and the kids today is the word stress. I have been thinking about this recently. I swear in high school, and I was in a upper middle class suburban high school in the suburbs of Boston, not like some sequestered rural area or something. I never heard the word stress. The word stress did not exist. That's so true. Now stress is how all kids talk about their adolescence, at least in the circles I'm in and the places I'm in, which are essentially quite similar to the place I grew up in. And so when it feels like the parents are adding to the pressure, even with the best of intentions, they just feel that and push back against it and withdraw and all that. I think, the only way to quality time is quantity time, with adolescents in particular. And so you do, I think the one thing I will say, this is all credit to Catherine. Catherine had a real instinct to prevent busyness for both of our kids. Our daughter didn't want to be busy. Our son was more maybe drawn to that. And Catherine just would not let it happen beyond a certain point, so that we had at least not necessarily every day, hours and hours for sure, but we had these blocks of time with our kids that didn't have to have an agenda particularly, but we're the family doing whatever we did. Mm-hmm. And I do think that's what really helps. So I know
just time together.
It's just clock time, just clock the time and sort of fight for that rather than any particular use of that even.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
Can I tell you, if nothing else served my selfish purpose of having you on than that sentence, you have done. And now we'll start the 6 hours now, actually. So just
finally, we're finally getting
producer Jason. Yeah. No, but Andy, it's so. If there, I feel like we've talked about this a lot on this podcast, and John and I have talked about this just in our time together, hanging out. I just feel so acutely the pressure of parenting. I feel in this technological age where everybody's, and I'm not even going to be the guy that blames it on Instagram or whatever, that's like, show me your beautiful family. And, or the quote you have, or the psychologist, hey, let me tell you about kids. But I just feel this, and dare I say, like, very unnatural temptation, sort of, and this is my story, but toward over intentionality, sort of like every moment has to be, and I don't even mean recorded, so forget all that. I'm not even going that angle. I'm just saying for myself, like every moment has to be celebrated, and these little Ebenezers throughout your child's life of how they can look, basically they can sort of look back one day and be like, my dad did this, and we flew to Brazil, and we took a sailboat around the Bahamas, and like witnessed to the natives, and you're just like, and those things are great, but I think for me it just gets really overwhelming. Like I feel this just trash compactor slowly crushing me under the pressure. Because
you can always hear, it's always what your kids first week at college are going to tell their new roommate friends. That's what you're saying. It's like the other side of it. If I'm like, let's not be so crazy intentional, and then I can hear Luca being like, I don't know, my dad just never really paid much attention. He was there, but
I don't even know if he's my real dad at this point, the way he treats me. But I think it's really encouraging for me to hear you say that, Andy, because something that does feel right, and again, I think I question this with just sinful nature and the things, is time spent, is like that my kids know I'm available, that they know I'm here, that they know that I like them. These kind of really elementary things that I think can get sort of stepped over on your way to intentionality, or like, which, and again, those things are really beautiful, like you said, intention with your Sabbath. Like these things are beautiful things. I think with kids it gets tricky because it's that taught thing to some degree, like, how much we learn from just watching our parents do it, which is a real gift to me with my parents, is seeing them just kind of live. People ask me that a lot because my dad was a pastor. They're always like, was that rough? And I'm like, the greatest thing my parents ever gave me with faith was that it was just very functional. Like it just worked. Like you live in life, and the way you treat people, if you treat them well, they treat you well. When you do what you say you're going to do, people really respond to that. And life sort of doesn't always work out, but at least sort of makes some sense, And it wasn't that we sat and did Bible studies every morning, and it wasn't that we went and did these incredible mission trips for every summer, and that we did those things to some degree. But I think it was just kind of watching my parents be like, they're really consistent with this stuff, and so that kind of makes sense to me. And there's nothing for me to push back against because they're not shoving it down my throat. I'm just watching it, and then intermediately they'll have some conversations, they'll check in and whatever. But I think for me, it's hard in today's age where everybody has these ways they live or thoughts they have about things, and that's fine. But it really, man, even at the osmotic level, just sort of seeps into my brain when, somebody's like, did I tell you what we did with our kids? Or I took my son just turned this age and we did this. And I'm like, that is great. I mean, John told me the other day, a friend did this really beautiful thing with his son, and John laughed at me because he watched me stare into my backyard, and he was like, you're thinking about that right now. And I was like, I feel so much shame right now.
I've never seen you physically just implode.
Oh no!
He watched because he's like, oh, he did this and they did this thing as his son loves this, and so for his 13th birthday, and I was just like the whole time because my son just turned 13. I'm like, well, it was good. I did the best I could. I mean, and again, these things are beautiful, and it's beautiful what he did. But for me, I'm like, oh God, I've already messed this up, and do I need to, so it's really encouraging, and it's not to say those things shouldn't be done. Again, that is not at all what I'm saying.
Well, I think some of them will actually come naturally because they're like what you are wired to do, like insightfully and intentionally in your own way, and other kids will tell their friends about it, and they'll be like, "Oh, my dad never thought to do that." But I will say, see, I mean. The thing ultimately that all of us most need to know, in my opinion, is I am unconditionally loved. Like it's grace. It's the reality of grace.
Yeah.
Well, that applies like at all levels of this system, right? The parents can't be like living have a law of how to convey grace to their child, and. For what it's worth, the interesting thing about our kids being in our 20s is, and we talk a lot about what formed them while they were in our home. And the fascinating thing is how few of the things, I mean, we were intentional about many things, like Sabbath, for example. And I will say our kids really did appreciate that and found that a very joyful and good thing. And they went off to college and did it themselves and so forth. But we once asked, we were all together and we said, Timothy and Amy, so the most important thing for us as parents is that our kids grow up not just knowing they're loved, but attributing that love to God, because that's our belief, our deepest belief. And we would just so want our kids to live in that, and they've chosen to. So we said, well, what was formative for you in your faith? And they said two things really that came out of the conversation. One was they said it never felt like we couldn't ask a question. So they said there was just never any anxiety or anything. If we asked a question about anything, you were always happy to talk about it. So I think that was significant because both of our kids were kind of thinkers and they wanted to think their way through things. But the other thing they said that we were just not expecting at all is they said, is the people who came to dinner.
Wow.
Now, you have to understand, I hope Catherine wouldn't mind me saying this. I think we wish we had the gift of hospitality, but I would not say we have the gift of hospitality, okay? Like, we're having folks over for dinner tonight. We have people over regularly. It never feels like it's like, there are places I go and homes I'm in, I'm like, they just know, or whole cultures just know how to do this. And honestly, it doesn't feel like that's quite what our house is like or dinner is like. Nonetheless, like by the grace of God, Catherine and I have just an amazing array of friends from lots of walks of life, and they come through town and we have them over, and then other friends, of course, from nearby who were an important part of our family's life, and they would come over. But it's not like we're throwing dinner parties, every night or every weekend or something. So this thing that I wouldn't even say we were that good at, for our kids, it was the variety of people who just sat at our table. And we did have the expectation the kids stay at the table basically for all of dinner, starting when they're very small. Just hang with us, it'll be over eventually, the grown-up conversation. But that also meant by the time they're 10 or 11, like they're really part of it. And we had friends who were really good at including them, right? And for them, just visitor after visitor, basically, most of whom, I would say were Christian, as we are, who just exhibited like dimensions of human flourishing that we don't necessarily, and could speak about things or had experiences that we hadn't had. And for our kids, that added up to, whoa, there's a whole world out there that's big and amazing and full of these incredible people. Wow. And I could be part of that if I walk in this way. But that was not, we had no plan. And we would have been foolish to try to build a plan like that. So funny. And yet that turns out to be the important thing.
I love that you didn't even think you were particularly good at it. That's so...
I mean, come over to dinner sometime and see how it goes. But I mean, it's fine. So it's fine. We're, it's just not, it's not our right hand, our dominant hand strength.
Right.
And yet it was really formative for our kids. I mean, the other thing I'll say is, if you care about your kids' spiritual development as opposed to almost any other aspect, the strange, mysterious reality is when they narrate that as an adult, whatever that journey is like, the most important players in it will not be their mother and their father. Just over and over, I see it's other people, other adults primarily. For me, though, it was other kids because I didn't grow up in a family that did practice faith, but other adults for me too. And it'll be people who you can't control how they interact, but God will bring them into your child's life at the right time. And then when they tell their story, you'll be like, I was there. I was like...
I asked that question, honey. Do you remember? That was me saying that.
Yeah, right. So, if you're praying for your kids, like pray for friends and other adults. Like that's what they will need as they grow up.
Yeah.
Gosh, what a great thought. John always, that's kind of one of John's mantras is he's like, it's not going to be the thing. Like we think, we joke about it like the way our kids are going to be like we wound our kids is never the thing we think we're doing, where it's like you have some moment, you're like, that was it. I did it. And it was going to happen and there it is. And, just go ahead and put the money in the counseling jar. But I think in the other way too, it's like you said, it's these ways that we underestimate that are happening in real time, where I'm trying to cultivate these moments and I'm like, that's going to be it.
And we're going to
go to bed that night and they're like, 2 days later, like, what did we do a couple nights ago? I'm like, oh, you mean when we had all those friends come over and pray over you? They're like, oh, yeah.
You mean when we did the Brazil sailboat Caribbean thing? You don't remember that?
It's so humbling.
Yeah. So let me ask one last question for part one. Do you feel like, is there something that I hate this, I'm trying to ask this in a way that doesn't feel weird, but looking back on that season, is there anything you think about now that you like wish you'd known then, or you're kind of like, man, that's something that now it's interesting to think about in that season I didn't know, in sort of retrospect?
Well, I'll tell you what comes to mind. I mean, I'm not sure. I kind of hope it doesn't generally apply, but I wish I'd been. I think I was not present in the ways I could have been. I think I wish I had been healthier emotionally. I think my pattern in my life, I'm a performer. I've done some of that as music, but kind of a lot of the other stuff I've done is I'm in front of people or in public, and I'm energized by it, and it often goes really well, better than I can even take credit for. It's just amazing and such a gift, and it's all good to an extent. But then I come home, and the emotion, the energy kind of drains away, and I had a season in there where I've never been, I don't think I've ever been diagnosable like as clinically depressed, but I just would come home with very little energy. And I think my kids knew I was not fully there. And now I was present at the dinner table like most of the time, though. I mean, if I'm being transparent, there were times when I was just so low. It wasn't even tired. I wasn't even asleep, but I was just in bed and not at dinner, not often, but more than once. And I can guarantee that my wife and children remember probably every one of those times. Wow. And I do wonder if I'd had a healthier, I think it is part of my calling to be out there in the world doing the things I do that I find so much energy in, but it's just taken me so long to learn energy management such that when I come home, I have energy left for home. And I'm sure Catherine would say I'm still learning that. But if I'd learned that earlier and better, I think it would have been meaningful. Let's put it that way.
That's really, thanks for saying that. Yeah, that resonates here. I think there is something I feel so acutely about the difference between the world and how it feels, especially when you're doing the thing you love and it's being celebrated. And then, and again, I'm only a man and I can only speak to the male experience, but then coming home as a dad and it's like, grab this move. No, you got it. And you're like, okay, this doesn't feel like it felt out there. Because out there, they were loving it. It was great. And you guys are kind of not appreciating my gifts. And you're making me take the trash out, and it's a pretty drastic thing.
And if you travel at all, like the family system builds itself to function without you, to be totally honest. You go home, you're like, I'm a little redundant here. Like, or, oh, Dad, hi. Like, but so, that's very real. That's very real. And being able to stay engaged when it's not like it is on stage, boy, that's a long story in my life.
We talk about that some, but that's a grace I really try to encourage dads with and myself with, and whatever, is like, it's okay that it's hard. It's sort of supposed to be that way. And I think if I'm not careful, I try to take the rules of occupation in the world into my home, and it really doesn't lay over those well.
Yes.
And I have to really leave that stuff at the door and serve, which is just not, I mean, I love it personally, but some people don't. And that's
someone needs to hear this.
If just one person hears this. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's control. The performative aspect of all three of our jobs currently is a big part of it. And as much sort of anxiety as I can have about that kind of stuff, ultimately, when you're on stage and you're doing your thing, it's sort of a one-way street for the most part. I mean, we can get into the nuance of like a room and the audience, all that kind of stuff, but you're in control and you're doing your thing. And then when you walk through the door, it's the opposite. It's the complete opposite. And the only way that you can make it harder is if you try to, Dave, like you're saying, get control of this,
Yes.
And Andy, like you're saying, it's
so
like
badly goes.
Amy she's had control for the last couple days, and then I come in and try to take control where I don't have any context for what's happening.
Like, you don't even know. I'm
she's like booking me shows up.
Congratulations, we found a tour destination for you, John.
Oh my gosh, look at this little 5-show run, John. That starts
Hey,
tonight.
real quick, we didn't really touch on this a whole lot, but just real quick, I was listening to you on another podcast talk about your sort of morning routine that you have started doing. I would just love for you just real quick to tell listeners about it, because I'm going to try it. And it's something that I know that I should have done some version of, but can you tell people like how you start your day, and when did you start doing this?
Are you talking to me or Andy? Because I have a great one.
Let's do Andy first, and then after we wrap up,
Dave,
great. You can record a voice memo of yours.
This was I wrote this book called The Tech-Wise Family, which the secret of that book is it's actually all the things Catherine figured out that we need to do that I then get to write about, and sound like they were my idea, though I think I give her credit. But anyway, I'm writing this book, and I realize in the midst of writing it, this a while ago, 7 years ago, that what I'm doing is in the morning is I'm going downstairs. We did have at that time, and I've pretty much always had no phones in bedrooms. So the phones all get plugged in the kitchen for grown-ups and kids. So I would go downstairs, right? And it's early morning and I'm making my tea. And what am I doing while I'm waiting for the tea to brew? I pick up my phone and this is back before I got rid of all the notifications and social and all that stuff. I was not very conscious back then of all that. So the screen is full. The moment you pick it up, the screen is full of stuff, right? I was like, this is terrible. This is clearly not the best way to start my morning. It's so obvious almost, but then again, we all know, probably a lot of folks, the reality is this is what you do. So I thought, okay, I've got to start doing something different. And what I started doing, and I can truly say now that I've done this for 7 years, and I think there might be 4 mornings where I have not done this, is before I look at a screen, I go outside. So when I'm home, this is straightforward. I walk out our front door. We live in a little corner lot, and I just walk out onto the front steps. I did this morning. It was -3 Celsius, 28 degrees Fahrenheit. I wasn't out there that long because it was cold and I was in my pajamas. But I go outside and I just stand there for a minute. And when I was in my very early 20s, I developed the habit intentionally of the first words out of my mouth in the morning being, "Thank you, God, for this day." So I would start every morning with that, starting during that year off from college. Sometime in my 30s, I stopped doing that. And I'm convinced it's when I got the screens to check. And the first day, 7 years ago, that I went outside, without me even thinking about it, this phrase from my 20s came back. And I just involuntarily said, thank you, God, for this day. Because when I step out this morning, it was a clear morning, under the stars, there's this one reddish one. I need to look up whether it's Mars or something else. But there's this, like, the sky is above me. The air it's not the controlled, speaking of control, it's not temperature controlled. Like some days it's humid, some days it's freezing, some days it's raining. And somehow being out in the midst of creation as a creature just is this reset on identity and gratitude. And I feel grateful every morning. And I go out. So that's all I do. And it's almost embarrassing how transformative it's been. Yeah. Like I would say when I started doing that was the true, because I write and talk about smartphones a lot, or people ask me to talk about it a lot. And it really is when my relationship, it took me about 2 weeks, by the way. The first 2 weeks that I did it, every morning I felt this like addictive, almost demand to look at the phone. And I just would resist it. I'd be like, get behind me, Satan. I'm not, And 2 weeks in, it completely flipped, and I felt that I went downstairs. It was like the phone was sort of almost saying, don't you want to see me? Don't you want to look at me? And I was like, no. Like I went from tempting to aversion. Like, you've got to be kidding. The outdoors is there. Like, I want to get outside before I look at you. And it changed. Like, I now would say I have lots of unhealthy things in my life, but the phone is no longer an issue because I think I started doing this.
Which is huge. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge feat to overcome just that one thing, because it's for most of us, it's the number one annoying distraction in our life.
So go outdoors. You'll feel wonderfully small. That's how I feel. I just feel so appropriately small, and then I go back in and take up whatever the work of the day is, but having been sort of embraced in this bigger reality that I can't control, I'm not responsible for, but that is a gift.
Yeah, it's probably a great thing to post, walking out and just kind of doing.
Gotta get that outdoor selfie.
Y'all see my account, and I'm like, thank you, God, for this day.
6:15 a.m.
Okay, so last thing
You're terrible. You're tempting me.
Listen, just do it. Just do it, Andy. Everybody would call you and pray for you. They'd be like, what happened to him? Oh, he was on bad mode. So we do the speed round to end these. So buckle up, because here we go. If you could have dinner with any three people, who would they be? You knew it was coming.
Oh, no. Oh, I hate these things. Are you going to ask me who the greatest Major League Baseball player was of all time? Because
that's question.
I was asked that on a radio show at the end of an hour like this, and I could not remember the name of a single baseball player of any kind, let alone form an opinion
you were like
about
Michael Jordan, but that feels wrong.
Technically, we'll take it.
Okay, dinner with three people. Okay, I'm going to make it really easy because is this like the ultimate three people? I don't know, but would I love to have dinner with them? Yes, I would, because I got to see them perform together. Jacob Collier, Madison Cunningham, and Chris Thiele.
I love that. Play. I'm way in on that.
It was one of my pilgrimages during my sabbatical. I went to London to hear them perform at Union Chapel. They did this incredible set. And just with such joy making music together. And each of them individually, I love and appreciate. I don't know any of them personally, but the chance to have them all in a room, ideally after a show, right? They kind of hang out after the show and have a long feast at some good restaurant in London.
Fun. They are so good. Yeah.
All right. So every morning you have to play one piece of music on the piano. It has to be the same piece of music that you play on the piano every day for the rest of your life. What piece of music are you going to play?
That I know that one. It's the first prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier that lots of kids learn in like 5th grade. It's the arpeggios it's in C. If you played it, you'd know it immediately. And it sounds so simple. It is very simple. It's extremely it's one pattern, just changes the chords, but goes in these incredible, beautiful directions. And I probably play that more days than not already. But yes, if I had to play one thing, I would start where Bach started and play that prelude. Yeah.
Look at you acting like you don't know how to do these. Okay, favorite sin you've committed recently? No. That John put that in here, and I was like, I want that to be in every speed round that ever gets that.
Why haven't we been asking that question?
But you just know somebody's going to be like, no, that's great. So I had the other night. I had it. And you're like, no, don't answer that. Please stop. Okay. So what's the one job you haven't had you'd still love to do?
Oh, probably travel agent. Now the problem is, like, this job is going away, with the internet and so forth. But when I was in high school, I took a vocational, like one of these tests. You fill out all these different questions, and then they tell you like what you ought to be. It's like called the Strong Campbell Interest Inventory or something like that. And it gives you like your top 3 things that you match the people who are in that field. So here's the thing. So the number one, I think, of my results was musician. So I was like, oh, I am a musician. The second was pastor, and I went to seminary and spent a chunk of my life, and then still in some ways I'm a pastor. And the third was travel agent. And I read it and I was like, this is magic. Because I had told no one at age 18 of my incredible love and fascination with travel agents and how much I would like to be one. And yet here it just surfaced on this thing. I'd literally never spoken a word to anybody because, it just didn't fit with anything else that I did, nor have I ever done it. Yeah. But if you need me to book flights or please be in touch.
That is so funny.
Because I would love to be a traveler.
Are you one of those guys that how to get the points to then transfer and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, completely. Yes.
I do kind of feel like travel agents, it's kind of coming back.
Yeah,
I have a couple friends recently in the last couple of years who have become travel agents.
Oh,
I think it's on the rise.
It's not too late.
They say at around 2030 it'll kind of hit.
I was gonna make that joke.
It's not quite there yet.
Joke. I knew you were gonna do that.
All right, last question. If you wrote a book on being a dad, what would the title be?
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
I love that. Right. There it is. It's either going to be you being a travel agent, or that's the next book. It feels like, or it could be "Don't Give Up" about your travel agency. It'd be keep flying. Thank you so much for your time, Andy. It really means a lot. And good luck with everything that you got going on. And I just want to give one last shout out to Praxis. If you guys don't know what they're doing, it's really incredible work. It's really, really incredible work. And so we're really thankful that you do it. It's really great.
Yeah, if anybody out there is in the early stage of something, we'd love to help if we can. So early stage businesses, nonprofits, and capital kind of ventures is what we work with. So if there's anybody like that, we want to know you and see how we can serve you.
Cut to Andy starting his travel agency through Practice. I called it here first. Might
as well.
Thank you so much.
Such pleasure.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day.
All right, thanks. Bye.